said was, he thought about was, he gave a statement. So the principle is sort of named by a statement. Principle 12 is about change, and the statement is creatively use and respond to change. That's interesting, Hannah, you spelled upside down. Creatively use and respond to change. So the only constant in life is the fact that things are, ebbing and flowing. The sun goes up, sun goes down, sun comes up again, tide goes out, tide goes in. But it's not the same, is it? It's similar, but it's not exactly the same. There's a progression going on, and that progression also, conforms to patterns, like seasons and things like that. So creatively use and respond to change. We're constantly working with the fact that the world's constantly changing, evolving. He also then gave us a sort of statement, a saying, well, let's go with the statement. It's a little bit more poetic. And that sort of engages with another part of the brain, really, sort of a bit more imaginative. See things for what they can be, not what they are. So like, rather than looking at the field and just saying, well, there's a sheep desert with nothing in it, see the potential, see the processes, see how you could begin to see how that would develop into something that was maybe mixed and diverse and more interesting. So this principle has two threads then, says David: designing to make use of change in a deliberate and cooperative way, and creatively responding or adapting to large-scale system change, which is beyond our control and influence. So there's those changes which we just have to move with. And again, like the seasons and things, you can't fight against these things. And there's other things like within a design framework that we can make conscious choices. The acceleration of ecological succession is the most common expression of this principle in permaculture. For example, the use of fast-growing nitrogen-fixing trees to improve soil and to provide shelter or shade, or for more vulnerable, slow-growing trees. This reflects an ecological succession process from pioneers to climax. Now, we touched on that yesterday. This idea of if you just leave nature to itself, stand back, even from bare rock, it will move to forest. It might take a long time, but it will get there. So that's sort of interesting. So as designers, we're trying to interact and work with that process. Change, whatever form it comes, is inevitable. Change is the one constant in life. Permaculture design is a way to successfully navigate the constantly shifting sands of time. Change can be frightening, destabilizing, and challenging, but it also represents a new opportunity. And again, it's challenging to do that, but think even with things like the terrifying things that are going on in the world at the moment, still represent enormous changes that we can somehow interact with and perhaps flip into some kind of an opportunity. Permaculture challenges us to embrace change and to apply learning to create ways forward that make best advantage of new conditions. For the very reason that things never stay the same, permaculture invites us to observe and interact to find creative ways to turn problems into solutions. So because the world is constantly changing, we need to be constantly observing and interacting. Is what was true yesterday true today? Often it is, but not always. That can catch you out. Things will morph and evolve. So there's a little bit of background. That was kind of where we were at yesterday. And obviously within that big scale, frightening thing about change, we can place things like climate change, we can place things like the coronavirus, we can place huge economic and social forces that are sort of working across the world. But understand that we are constantly interacting and shaping with that. And we also talked about yesterday about our own individual personal power, and to really feel understand how much one person can have an impact. And during the course of the course, I'll expand on a couple of people who I think have certainly changed the course of my life, and I can see evidence of change around. Just from sometimes simple ideas can be so powerful and impactful. So, principle 1, observe and interact. We're constantly accepting new information and also testing that. In some ways, try and interact by understanding the degree to which that might be true by testing it. We learn by making mistakes. We talked about that yesterday. We sort of make these constant adjustments to find a balancing point. The icon, so each principle also has this symbol, this icon. And again, it's accept the idea that some of us are more graphic in the way that we remember things. We're more visual in the way we might interpret things. Or we might use, this is sort of more poetic statement to help us understand. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That's an interesting thing as well. So also, when we observe and interact, it's reminding us that what one person sees, someone else might see differently. And we can learn, by learning to become active observers, we can also use our knowledge and experience to flip a problem into a solution. So I always give a really simple example is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. A cow might walk past you and deposit a whole bunch of manure, sloppy, lovely cow manure right in front of you. And you might go, oh, that's disgusting. Oh, that's hazardous, dangerous, flies, disease, or whatever. Where to other people, they might see that as an amazingly useful resource. In India, cow manure is pretty much money as far as they're concerned. And I've seen people watch a cow make its deposit in the street, and they've run up and scooped it up in their hands and run home and slapped it on the wall of their house where it dries out in the sun, and they use it for cooking. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's how you see things, and to allow yourself to sort of challenge yourself to sometimes to see things from different perspectives, and understand that other people might see the thing that you're seeing as foul, they might be seeing it as a resource or something that's very beneficial. So the icon for this is, it could be a person with their hands up and their head in the cloud. I think it's a tree though. I see a tree. I see a tree with a hole in it, inviting you to peer inside. If you saw a tree with a hole in it, surely you would have to just look inside. There might be a treasure or a secret in there, or perhaps an owl or something interesting. It's inviting you to explore. It's inviting you in. So good design depends on a free and harmonious relationship between nature and people. Careful observation and thoughtful interaction provide the design inspiration, choices, and patterns. Good design is not something that is generated in isolation, but through continuous two-way interaction with the subject. So again, we're going to try and really get us to think about things in a sort of constant, re-evaluated way. Permaculture reminds us that we can solve problems through design based on experimentation and careful planning. So we can experiment and plan, turn that cow manure into some beautiful compost, crumbly, fertile soil that's going to feed us. Designed to fulfill functions using locally available resources and skills. So another observation is, and what Han's going to begin to ask you to do is, start looking around. What resources are just lying around that you might be able to access? I showed you a picture. Paul saw a pile of stones, and within minutes, he had Rogers receive his family building a raised bed. He said, you have stones, you must build a raised bed. And it's just spot those opportunities by kind of like taking the filters away from your eyes almost and seeing things afresh. The proverb, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, reminds us that the process of observing influences reality, and that we must always understand that truths and values vary as to who is doing the observation. So sometimes I say to people is, the best, when you're observing your own land, your own garden, you see it in a particular way because you've been looking at it and thinking about it from that perspective, from your perspective. And it's tremendously powerful and interesting is to bring someone completely different in, to get them to look at it from their perspective. Different culture, different values, different personal experience, different specialities. It's amazing what differences people see. So a lot of today is really about active observation, allowing ourselves to see things fresh. Somehow take those filters from your eyes, your tired eyes, you're used to seeing things in a particular way, and try and see it afresh, anew. See the life in things, see how things are constantly changing, the dynamism that is in the natural world, and how things are also influencing and shaping each other. Okay, so Han is here. She's going to give us a few thoughts, get going on the observations. So I shall step aside.
Is there any way you put a polar bear up? In a speedy fashion. Just go without it.
You could go without the polar bear. I could have done that, but perhaps with a moment's notice. Okay, do you want to sit?
I'll just sit. Well, I stand.
Okay, yeah, you can do that.
Sorry about this.
Morning, Han.
Morning. Okay, at this point, usually I show a picture of a polar bear. So you can just imagine yourself a little polar bear here with his eyes shut. Okay, you can't see him because it's all white. Right, so when I show people a picture of a polar bear, I like to ask them, what is a polar bear? Well, it's a bit short, a bit small, but what has a polar bear got to do with observe and interact?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
often I get
How's that?
blank faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, it's fine. And the reason I show polar bears is at this point I like to tell a little story. And it's a story about the polar bear and the Eskimo. And it's when the Eskimos, the Inuits, came to their lands. And they came there and they were cold and they were hungry. And the Eskimos were all hiding out in the snow and the ice. And the little Eskimo, who was the coldest and the hungriest and the loudest, and perhaps the most courageous, decided he'd go and see the great bear. Because he wasn't scared of him, he wasn't afraid. He respected him. And he went up to the great bear and he said, "Hey, great bear, I'm really cold and I'm really hungry. How should I build my home?" And the great bear looked at the Eskimo and he said, "Little Eskimo, I can see you're cold and hungry, but look around you. What can you see?" And the little Eskimo was like, "Well, there's nothing here. I'm just in a landscape full of snow and full of ice, and I'm really cold, and I'm really hungry." And the great bear knelt down to the Eskimo and said, "There we go. You found your answer. You build your home out of snow." And that's what the Eskimos did. Is they observed the polar bear and they built igloos out of snow. And this is a really simple story, but I think a very effective parable, I think it's called, to demonstrate what I like to term the universal language of nature. And that is how we like to observe in permaculture, using the universal language of nature that everybody knows and everybody can learn or relearn, because I feel like a lot of people have forgotten. And you might think, oh, it's just a story, but actually it's not just a story, because a lot of indigenous or ancient people used to think the same way. There's the Navajo people, I think they're called, in New Mexico, and when they came to their land, they were cold and hungry, and it was a land of extremes. It was really hot in the summer and really cold in the winter. So what do you think they did? They observed nature. They watched the ground squirrel, and they observed that he would build his den 30 centimetres below the ground surface. And that was 30 centimetres difference was enough to insulate it during the winter and keep it cool during the summer. So then they knew when they built their adobe houses, they would build their walls 30 centimetres thick. So this is an effective way to see, using the observations and the universal language of nature, how you can then apply that to your design. So yeah, hopefully that is an example of how you can reawaken your own universal language of nature. So have you gone through the permaculture principle, day one?
Yeah.
So if you remember in the principle one, observe and interact, the tree icon. The tree icon is a strong icon, and it reminds us to observe through different perspectives. So I like to start here when thinking about how to observe for design, how to observe. Forgive me if I'm repeating you.
No.
So it reminds us to spend time observing. It's not just a quick fix. You're not just going to go, okay, river over there, sunshine's there, there's the landform, tick the box, I've done my observation. It's a constant thing. It's not something you're going to stop doing, potentially. Hopefully, this is something that you will, from this point onwards for the rest of your life, continue to do and continue to hone the skill and get better at it. But observation takes constant work. It takes constant observation, because things are in flux. That's what we want. Things are constantly changing. So it's about learning to observe those. So the tree asks us to look at different senses. So you might think, okay, I'm on my site, it's really sunny over there, tick, sunny spot, probably put some benches there or something. But if you actually physically go there and use your other senses other than the visual, you might be like, oh, actually it's the coldest place on site. You might think it looks sunny, sunny means warm. Actually, through my physical senses, I've now figured out it's actually the coldest place. You think, why is it? That might be because you're experiencing the wind blow. So it just takes it to another depth and helps, guide you to use your other senses and discover new things. And the tree also asks you to look through different perspectives, and I think this is really important because it invites you to take a step back. So when you're on your site, take a step back, have a look around you, think, where is my site in the big landscape? So it's not just about you and your site and you're honing in on that, but it's also important to take a step back and think, what else is around me? What's affecting my site? Why am I getting flooded? Is it something's happening further up in the landscape? So yeah, to take a step back and have a look at the big picture. But having said that, it's also important to then hone in on details and get up really close and have a look, see what's happening. Maybe you're getting flooded because of a small thing. Maybe someone's plugged up a hole, you just pop the plug out and then everything's back to normal again. So hone in and have a look at things at closer detail. And also, it's important to look behind the scenes. So if you imagine when you're a kid, for some of us, we look at the old TV screen and we're like, wow, that's a really cool picture. And then you'd be like, hang on, how does that work? And you'd go behind the TV box and you'd see lots of wires coming out and you'd be like, oh, where those wires go? So it's about not taking things at face value, look around it, turn it upside down. I could be talking about an idea, I could be talking about a landscape. It's just the idea of checking things out from all angles. And of course, to look from another perspective, step into someone else's shoes. Why are they acting like that? Maybe someone's upset today. So instead of just going, oh, they're really angry and upset, maybe go, why is Andrew upset this morning? So it's about step inside someone else's shoes. Why are they, sitting in that corner? Or it's looking at, why is that tree growing there? Or why do the animals use the landscape like that? So it's looking at many different perspectives. And an important thing about observe and interact is to observe without judgment. And that's a really important thing. So it's difficult and it takes time perhaps to practice, comes more naturally to others, some than others. But to be able to walk on somewhere and observe something without a judgment, without having an idea, just recognize something's there and recording the knowledge can be difficult to do, but that's what we're asking you to do. And then finally, the more physical side of your task for today. When you are observing your site or your location, we'll be asking you to think about what forces or elements are present on site. So you might be thinking about the climate. So what's the climate like? Oh, I'm in a tropical environment. There's lots of tropical plants here. Or are you not in a tropical environment? Maybe you're in a rainy Welsh hillside. Think about the topography. Think about the landform. Think about where it's high, where it's low. Think about soils. So you can go out if you want to, you can test the soil. You might think, oh, I'm on a clay site, but then you might find in another part of the land it's sandy. So go and test the soil. So physically go and pick it up, wet it, rub it, feel it, get, what's the word? Textural with it, feel it, yeah.
Smell it, taste it.
Smell it, taste it. Some people, don't have to taste it. I'm going to say that. And then have a look around and think about what vegetation is there. If you know names of vegetation, great. If you don't, just draw pictures, however it is you want to record it. Think about what kind of wildlife is there. Think about the type of plants, any people, any communities that might be there. Think about where the wind comes, and depending on what kind of landscape you're designing for, fire might also be an element. So yeah, and think about the hidden things as well. So nature leaves clues. So an idea of observing and interacting. When an ecologist walked onto a landscape one time, I remember someone telling this story, and I was like, that's really interesting. When ecologists walk onto a landscape, sometimes they can see where a lake or a body of water has been, because wildlife that used to visit that years ago still go and visit the area because it's been passed down through their genes. So they keep going to expect to find this body of water that may have now dried up. So that's an interesting observation. So just by observing, it can lead you to, you know, some really, really interesting details. So that's just an idea of how I'd ask you to use your observational skills today. So if you could possibly get a piece of paper, go outside. If you've got a site, great. If you haven't, maybe borrow next door's garden, or just use your, you know, your immediate surroundings. And I'd possibly draw, if you can, draw a base map, a rough base map, so it gives you an idea of what you're drawing to. And then on other bits of paper, I'd possibly look at topography, soil, climate, and just make little notes along all those subjects. Is that okay? Yeah? Not too much information. Good. All right, cool. So that's your design activity today. Is everyone clear with that? Yeah? Okay.
Great, thanks, Aaron.
Okay, no worries.
Brilliant. We're sort of easing you into this bit by bit. Now, I can say when it was interesting, when we were doing our PDC as a participant in '95, it was just at the time when we were thinking of moving to Chicken Shack. We were looking at this 5-acre holding and 3 houses, and thinking about how we would, you know, approach design. And with 8 people, that was a hell of a challenge because everybody had different ideas. And that was sort of when I started to really, I sort of got the power and the value of permaculture. Was it enabled us to make a consensus, you know, quite quickly about placement and where to put key things. But this was something that I really learned at the time, and only I actually realized years later. And it was this, is that, you know, when you do the before and after photo, and you're doing something and making something, and it's like, here, there's before, and here's the after. Here's a tip. You cannot take too many before photos because you can't go back and take them afterwards. It might seem like an obvious thing, but here's the thing, is at the beginning, you don't really know what it is that you're observing. You don't necessarily know the site, or you're just beginning to get to know the site. So what happened to us at Bryn Clwyn, at the Chicken Shack house co-op, was I've been there about 10 years, and I was gardening, and actually we were getting ready for PDC, so I was trying to spruce up the garden and make everything look wonderful. And it was a nice sunny day, and I felt a little bit, I've been working, and I felt a bit weary, and I sat down on the path, and I had a little doze, just lying there in the field, and I woke up, and the 2 cats were by me. It was kind of cute, and I could hear bird song everywhere. Honestly, because just all I could hear was bird song. And what I remembered was 10 years ago when we got there, it was this exposed, windswept, treeless landscape with no birds. Or were there? How many birds weren't there? Like, we didn't actually record what wasn't there because we had no sense of what was going to be there in the future. It sounds like an obvious thing, but it's actually, we had nothing. You need a baseline to make a comparison. How has your project impacted your land? So, Bridget, imagine 10 years' time, you're walking along the field at Penargarneth, and it's clouds of birds coming up, and you're going, oh, well, there's 50% more than before, or is it 60, or is it 100? I have no idea, because we didn't measure what wasn't there at the beginning. There was another interesting thing that happened, which was, there's a lovely pasture field at the front of Chicken Shack, and it'd just been grazed forever. I probably think there's an ancient hill fort actually within the landscape there. They found pottery and remains there for about 2,500 years ago or something, really ancient. You think this land could have been grazed for that long, which is quite a thought. And so obviously it's been really simplified. Now what happened was we excluded grazing animals. We decided not to do grazing animals. We did a cut of hay every year. And again, about 6, 7, 8 years in, it was Amanda Dean came, the herbalist. She came and she said, "You've got a field of ribwort plantain." And I looked, it was like, so we have. And I hadn't even noticed. I just thought it was just grass, you know. There's some very humble plants down there that you don't really take in. And she said, well, that's one of the most powerful healing plants that we've got in Britain. And you've got a field of it. It's almost like you cultivated your field to create a crop of plantain. And I hadn't even noticed that they were there. And then I thought, well, were they there before? And to what extent were they there? And then you start to get really down into the grass and you start, oh, we got some yellow rattle here. I didn't know we had that. Was that there before? I don't know. So part of what you want to do is kind of notice what isn't there. Notice the things that are missing and maybe start to see the potential. And even if you're not quite sure what it is that you're recording, take lots and lots, especially in the digital age. I mean, back then we were all taking things on, you know, film cameras, send it off to the chemist and come back weeks later and you can't remember why you took the photo. They're all blurry. But digital, you can take hundreds, you can take thousands, you can put them on memory stick and throw them in the cupboard and forget about them. And hopefully many years later, they'll be there. I think these can be incredibly useful resources. And I've dug through old cupboards and scanned in my old sort of early photos of Chicken Shack. So again, I think part of that observation is seeing it as a time sequence and then keeping doing that process as well. It's a regular, like Han was saying, it's not just a single, right, I've done my observation now, I've seen that, I know what's there, we can now just go off and do other things. So it's this constant process. And we also in permaculture have this zoning idea, which we'll expand on later on. But basically, the closer you are to your front door or your back door, the more times you observe that space. You're constantly going in and out. Every time you go down the front path of your house and wherever it is, however the setup is, you notice that bit the most and you interact with that bit the most. So you can put the more high maintenance things, the things that you need to sort of get new information from all the time, close to your front door. That's why maybe put your delicate little seedlings maybe that you might need to know, then you need watering quite regularly and things like that. Or you might put the baby outside just, you know, near where you can keep an eye on it, rather than, you know, sort of 2 blocks down our view. These kind of obvious things, but they become strategic things that can help groups of people make consensus about where to put things. There's that kind of inner logic of it. Yeah, any thoughts on observation? Anybody would like to share something? Oh, there's 26 comments in the chat. That's my glasses. Thank you. Please, any thoughts, comments, or anything?
There was a herb patch that I had, and that was kind of way off in the dark corner of part of the garden that I couldn't even see. So I would never kind of pick the herbs or anything like that. And then this year I built a spiral, but I built it in the part where, so there's like a kind of cut, what do you call it, like a paving part of the garden as you come out of the kitchen door, and then it goes off into the kind of grassier bits at the back. So I've put the herb spiral where I would walk past that bit to kind of have enjoyment of the other bit of the garden, but also be more inclined to kind of use the herbs as I come in and out of that space. And I have found that I do use them a lot more, and there's like salad stuff that I'll cut now rather than kind of letting everything, grow wild.
Yeah, wonderful point. And again, sometimes just looking at your herb bed, you think, oh God, those chives look fantastic, and almost it inspires you to give you a recipe or something like that. So just a kick-off. I used to find when I'm cooking, I just need one ingredient to speak to me, and I get an idea about what I want to do. And if you can see them, I'm going to take some pictures of our front garden. We've got this tiny little urban front garden at Dragons, and Yossi and I have been playing with it now for a while, and I don't know, I think I can remember, we got like 14 different herbs or something, and salad and green and kale and things like that, right by the front door, because our allotment's a quarter of a mile away, and so I'm not going to go a quarter of a mile just to go and cut a handful of kale maybe, but if it's right there in the front garden, it's speaking to you, you know, it's saying, I'm ready, you know.
And as simple as that observation
Come
was, jump in again,
yeah.
Funny teeth. But as simple as that observation was, it's that kind of observation, that simple interaction that can change your life, you know. And the interesting thing is maybe you didn't move the herb patch, and you just brought the herbs close to your door. So you've got a small patch close to your door, you're like, oh yeah, the mint, you know, but maybe you want to harvest more mint or increase that mint. You've still got that patch far away in the corner doing its thing, but you know, the stuff you use immediately reminds you, oh, the mint, I can get some more of that. And then you go out further out, you know, into your design to harvest the mint or get some more mints to bring back. So it doesn't have to be all there, but that little bit of reminder is enough as well. So yeah, just think about
that's
that.
a really good point. Yeah.
Jump in and out.
I remember, so Chris Dixon, a wonderful permaculture teacher from Dolgethly, and he was saying a similar thing to what you were saying, and he's got a couple of, he's got a gate in his track, so he has to jump out of the car and open the gate. And he's got some currant bushes next to the gate. And then he can see, oh, black currants. And it reminds him to go up into his sort of zone 4, more remote area where he's got, carpets of them. But it's like a little indicator species right by the gate where he's going to notice it.
The other thing about that I really like.
Come on, we can't hear you.
So the other thing about that I really like, that you might not possibly think about, but is I used to live in a house where I had 2 gates to open, and it stopped me going to the shop, I can tell you. I had to get out in the rain, go to the gate, open the gate, get in the car, drive down the track, open another gate, shut the gate, straight into that. I was like, oh, absolute nightmare. But the idea of, maybe in the summer, maybe not when I'm getting wet, but the idea of a currant bush being next to the gate, which I find a battle, constant, headache. To have that pleasure next to the gate, it's a really good way of mediating this pain that I'm having to put myself
You might
through.
get some raspberries and get
Yeah, it's like, okay, if I get out, maybe I'll reward myself some currants. You know what I mean? Or, you know what I mean? So that's also another perspective to look at how you're designing. Just another little thing. So I just chuck that in.
Han, while you're sitting, oh, he was gone now. I was going to ask Han.
What's that?
Han, I was just wondering, what sort of scale of space are you talking about as observing for this initial, the centre of this observed expansion?
I think I'm going to leave that to you. I wouldn't give myself too much of a challenge. I wouldn't try designing the city.
I'm just imagining Barrington Hall. It's a lot to observe there.
Yeah, maybe just a small...
exactly, 22 acres is a lot to work out. I know how complex it is.
Yeah.
So possibly, I was imagining if you had a garden, maybe you had a small garden, you might possibly design that space. So nothing too...
But the process of, let's say if you were to observe the whole thing, you'd be doing it in a very big overview, not so much kind of thing. So you might even like to do that, but you might then also might prefer to rezone into like an immediate.
You've got a small part that you're looking at, but then also zone out and think, oh, how do those things interact? And then go back in again to that small space.
Because she's also asking you to think about how the small bit fits into the bigger bit. How this bigger overarching landscape, it might not be your land even.
So imagine like a jigsaw puzzle. You're looking at the picture of the jigsaw puzzle, looking at all the colours, and then you think, how does that fit in with all the other colours and pictures on this bigger jigsaw puzzle? Think about it like that.
But where does the wind come from? Where does the flood come from when it rains? Or where's the flow of wild animals, or the flow of traffic, or these kind of things? It might be shaping the space in some way, informing how that space functions, and allow yourself to kind of see that.
Because when you start looking at things like that, and you start putting the pieces together, it starts telling you a picture that you weren't looking at before, because it wasn't necessarily in your universe. But now you start to look, you're like, oh, you start to see why things are happening, or maybe things are important to keep that you just didn't think or consider about before. It's about discovering things that you haven't really noticed.
Try and allow yourself to see it afresh, see it somehow differently, rather than through the legend. Imagine you're a spaceman or something, seeing it for the first time almost. Say sort of taking these sort of filters off your eyes. You get very used to seeing things in a certain way.
And it can be really useful to go in with different lenses on. So maybe your first lens might be observing wildlife. So just go outside for 10 minutes, just look at wildlife.
And one of the things I'm always looking at and I'm most interested in are accidental, unplanned things, the thing that just spontaneously happen.
The wild card.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm interested more in the plants that are blown in and self-seeded, because they might be telling us something about the nature of that environment, rather than the ones that you planted, because some ways you're controlling that. Or perhaps if you observe how the other tenants, other people in your space operate in a sort of thoughtless way, that sort of things accidentally happen. Like we said, Ian said last night about the way you want to go with the flow of nature, see how things naturally move and try and move with them, and see whether you could see in any way how,
a small interaction might make an effective change.
Yeah. And another thing, I thought this thing about your gate, and I thought that's an interesting point. There's these friction points in life. And let's just say you've got a gate with a faulty latch. We had this on a PDC somewhere once, and it was getting out the kitchen, and you couldn't do it. You had to put the pot down on the floor to pick up the thing. It was annoying. And then it takes a moment, so you put the pot down, you do the latch, and you go through. You multiply that by, you do that 10 times a day, and you're there for 12 days on a PDC. You've done that 120 times. And you now wasted like sort of 2 hours or something picking your pot up.
Not only that, but it's also then stacking lots of negative thoughts. You're like, oh, that bloody pot, oh, that bloody great, oh, that great. Stacking that negative energy, you just think, I don't need that.
So you have an opportunity to fix it.
Yeah,
Let's take 10 minutes, let's fix it, and then we haven't got that problem anymore. And that's like an investment that's come through observing and interacting with your landscape. It sounds like a silly example, but there's millions of these things. And your whole life can be built up with these little friction points if you're not careful.
Friction points are really, really interesting to observe as well.
Yeah. How think about how you go through a space and how that, you know, how you interact with it. It's good to kind of observe yourself a little bit.
Anne? Yeah. Are you wanting us to actually go out into a space and as well as observing everything, imagining putting things in there like building a raised having a wild, just observing?
Yeah, just make that, sorry, I didn't make that very clear at all. Absolutely. Okay. Design at this stage, it's no design, just observing. So we're just recording
what is there.
What is there.
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question. My garden is quite overgrown with lots of different types of grass, which I have absolutely no idea of the different species and stuff. Do you have any sort of resources of how to identify different grasses and stuff? Because I'm really interested in it, but I just don't know where to kind of look.
Yeah, well, you can always check out Wildlife Trust sites, Natural England sites. Those kind of sites often have things where you can Google, you know, types of grasses or wildlife found in, you know, in grass swarms.
What's the one you said?
Natural England
and Wildlife
Trust. I'll try to think of a few today and put the resources down.
Thank you. Great.
You can also just capture some of them and photograph them or put them on a table and just notice the differences between them. How do you identify grass? That's really interesting, isn't it? What would be the characteristics? Identify one kind of grass from another. Its height, its structure, the seed head. Often the seed head shape is very revealing.
They're so very different. They say a lot about the space you're in as well.
So even if you don't know the name of the grass, you're actually asking yourself, how do I differentiate this one from that one? Oh, look, it's slightly coarser, stronger, you know, whatever, sort of less vigorous or something like that. And spotting, you know, Ian talked about these more modern varieties that we're using in agriculture. They're very aggressive, they're very tough. Or are you looking at something that's more, you know, more of a wild variety? Even if you can't name them, you then start to get a feel for what makes them different. I think that would be a good way of approaching it.
Yeah. And you can approach it in many different ways. Like, you know, I've done this exercise a few times with a few different people, and some people write lists. Some people draw pictures, and people literally just focus maybe just on a flower, and they just drew the flower and observed the flower. And you know, if that's as far as you get, and that's what you want to hone in on, cool. I want you to have a go at everything, but you've got your list. You know what to do. But if during today that's what you're honing in on, that's fine. You know.
Yeah. So. There's no kind of rules to this. We're just trying to get you to sharpen your senses and your sort of critical faculties. Yeah. So like Han said, you won't just choose one little avenue to explore. Let's just go with the grasses. Let's look at those and see what we learn. Think about different species differentiation and they might actually be telling us something about the landscape too. It's those volunteer plants, the things that just happen to be there, often are telling you something about the characteristics of that space or landscape.
Yeah. And also, there's a little plant I like to point out, I can never remember the name of it, it's Melissa something. So a partner is walking through a landscape, I'm like, what's this plant? And then he's always like, oh, you know, I said, what's it telling me? And the plant grows in winterborn rivers. So it's an indicator species of it being wet sometimes, but not always wet. So when we're walking through the landscape, you wouldn't know there's a river there. But I know there's a river there because I know that plant is growing.
Some time of the year it floods there,
It floods seasonally, so that kind of thing gets me excited. But
Great, so that's your introductory thought of the day. Observe and interact. We'll keep this as a theme throughout the day. And all of these, think about how these principles build on each other. We come from the fact that the natural world is constantly changing. And therefore we navigate, understand that change by making constant observations, maybe taking notes, photos, but just really being more aware and taking in the information.
Yeah.
Okay, look, it's 10 to 10.
Cool.
We're just going to take our 10-minute break, and we'll just see you in 10 minutes. We'll leave the window open. I'm just going to stretch my legs and get ready for the next presentation. Thank you, Hannah.
Please can you write down the instructions of the activity, because you've talked about it a few times and I actually don't know what it is that I'm meant to do again. Thank you.
Yeah, I will do, no worries. Thanks.
Hannah, when are we expected to do this?
Hey?
When are we expected to do?
Throughout the day. Just throughout the day.
It could be a really small thing that they observe.
Yeah, don't feel like I have to, like it's a gigantic scale thing. Just literally, if I was an example, I would just walk out into my garden, basically draw a square of the garden, sheds there, this is here, and then just go out and just observe a few things. You don't have to do the whole list.
No, that's fine.
But sorry if you felt like you had to. It's not the whole list I'm asking you to do. It's just experiencing. It's just being aware of those are things that you can look at. And there'll be skills that you'll be using throughout the week as well. So observational skills will help you to gain. It's just about recording information.
Yeah.
So the idea is that by going through this process, recording all of the information, we'll have enough information to help you design your project. So the first week is going to be about designing it on your space so that you know the space and you feel comfortable within the space. And you've tried a few things out. And then week 2 for the design challenge, you put into groups, you'll all be designing one space, and you'll each take a piece of it. So maybe over the weekend, Sean will be doing wildlife, someone else will be doing something else, you know, so you'll each have a section to cover, so it won't be the whole thing. Because of course, designers work in teams a lot of the time, so, and it's a lot to do in a couple of weeks, but it's just about having a go and, you know,
Yeah.
if I write a list of what I've talked about really quickly, then you can then start processing that slowly. I'm definitely somebody that needs something visual and a list.
Yeah.
Me, so yeah, I'll do that. And I can see that yeah, you've got field observation cards, so that'd be super if they could be scanned in. That's Kasia, she's still on WhatsApp.
Yeah, I can sort that, that's
yeah,
fine.
great, because I was thinking about that. Steffi's got some here as well, some really good ones, but I can't be here all day because I've actually got to be at work. So yeah,
I'll do that now actually.
that'd be great, because that's, you know, it's just helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think Steffi might have photographs of them, or maybe I'll send some photographs to Steve so they can get them put down. So I'll just go and write a quick list of, you know, like an activity sheet for what you guys have got to do today before I have to go. All right.
Thank you.
Ciao.